Good morning. Welcome to Bible study over a cup of tea. We will continue our studies in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Chapter 12, 13 and 14, they are very important chapters, especially because Paul is addressing the issue of the gifts of the Holy Spirit, manifestation of the Holy Spirit, the ministry of the Holy Spirit. And there are a lot of misunderstandings today in our churches regarding the Holy Spirit. So was in the first century. And so that's why study of 12, 13, 14 is important. I really want to encourage you that you should study this chapter. Let me read verse 1 and 2. Now about spiritual gifts, brothers, I do not want you to be ignorant. You know that when you were pagans, somehow or others, you were influenced and led astray to mute idols. The Christians at Corinth, many of them had come from pagan background. They were idol worshippers. Idols are made by human beings. The human beings, they supply the ideology, the liturgy, the philosophy. And so, there are groups of people worshipping one idol may differ from the other groups of worshippers of other idols. So in polytheism or in pluralism, one sect may not agree with another, and there may be difference. There are difference of loyalties, and each particular idol worshipper groups have their own way of thinking than the other. Now these groups who had come from pagan background, when they came to the church, somehow because they were influenced, Paul says, and they still had that baggages. And so even in Christianity, while they were practicing the Christianity, the follower of Jesus Christ, they were led astray. They had a different kind of understanding. It is possible that although we are all follower of Jesus Christ, disciple of Jesus Christ, but because we belong to different denominations, because we come from different backgrounds, our liturgy may differ, that is all right. Our polity may differ, our practices may differ, that's all right. But if there is a rivalry against each other, if there is a competition, as if like we are worshipping different God, then there is a problem. And that's what Paul is trying to address. Three things he says very importantly. In verse 4, he says there are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. So remember, there is only one Spirit, but many services. It has many manifestations. We must always remember that. The second thing, he says, although there are different services, but, verse 7, now to each one the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. The purpose, the objective is same, the common good. Now, there may be different kind of services. Paul mentions about 8 type of services. He says, the spirit of the message of wisdom and the message of knowledge, then to another faith, to another gifts of healing, to another powers, to another prophecy, to another distinguishing of the spirits, and to another tongues and another interpretation. So, yes, there are different kinds of ministries. But as the ministries are evolved, they are all for common good. They are not self-serving. They are not private enterprises. They are not segregated enterprises. And there is no rivalries. Paul goes on to say in verse 3, how is it possible that you have the same Spirit, but you are cursing each other? There was, I think, problem in the first century church. He says, therefore I tell you that no one who is speaking by the Spirit of God says, Jesus be cursed. You don't curse Jesus and you don't curse the body of Jesus Christ. But if you are, acknowledging Jesus is the Lord, if any group is acknowledging the Jesus Lord, then recognize that they have the same Spirit. You belong to the same Spirit. The services are different and you have the same cause. Common cause. So the first thing, one Spirit, many services. Second thing, they are all meant for common good. The third thing, in verse 11 he says, all these are the works of one and the same Spirit, and He gives them, it's the Holy Spirit or God who decides, He gives them to each one just as He determines, as God determines. It's not that individuals like idol worshippers, they decide how should the idol should look, whether idol should have a big eyes or fat nose, or idol should wear this cloth or that cloth. The idol makers, the creators, human beings, they decide. But in this case, he says not you and I don't decide. It's the God who decides who will have what kind of services and who will have what kind of gifts. It seems like in first century church, people were determining who will have what kind of gifts, and they were imposing the gifts, and there were rivalries. It is sometimes amazing that in our Christian churches, some gifts are recognized more than the others. Some are given more priorities, more respects, more honor than the other gifts. But it's the same Spirit and the common good. And that is why we see there is a mushrooming of this private enterprise, healing ministries and music ministries and all kinds of ministries which are growing, and they are growing sometime even at the expense of the church. And these ministries, the parachurches or NGOs who fail to understand the purpose of the many gifts and the common good, sometimes they end up using the churches. The church becomes only a platform for their own existence and for their own growth. Paul was probably foreseeing the same danger in the first century, that if individuals, they start segregating these services and fail to understand the common good of the gifts of the Spirit, why there is one Spirit and many services, if we fail to understand the purpose, then probably we may end up into fragmented groups. Paul was very wise and he was foreseeing the danger. We need to be wise and we need to foresee the dangers if we fail to understand this. May God help us to understand that the spiritual gifts are given for common cause. One Spirit, but many services. May God help us to respect each other, love each other, facilitate each other, encourage each other. May God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.